The TikTok video played again, Brenda's laugh echoing from the phone screen as Chad dipped her low, her body pressed against his in what looked like some upscale Parisian club. My coffee mug, still warm in my hand, slipped. It hit the linoleum, shattering into a dozen pieces, just like the future I thought we had. "This is what you get, Aaron," Chad's voice boomed from the speaker, "for thinking she was ever yours." The cheap kitchen linoleum caught the mug's shrapnel, a sharp noise against the morning quiet. I stared down at the ceramic shards, then back at the phone still clutched in my hand. Brenda. My Brenda. The woman I was supposed to marry in 3 months, swaying with Chad in what looked like some fancy European nightclub. The video was clear. Her head was thrown back, a wide smile on her face. Chad's arm tight around her waist. They moved like they'd been dancing together their whole lives, like they belonged in each other's arms. 3 days. 3 agonizing days I'd spent calling hospitals, checking police reports, trying to keep the panic from tightening its grip on my chest. I'd imagined accidents, forgotten passports, lost phones. I'd rehearsed scenarios for her safe return, for the moment she'd walk through the door, explaining it all away with some flimsy excuse about a dead battery or an urgent work trip that kept her from calling. Now here she was, on Stacy's TikTok feed, alive and well, vibrant and laughing. Not with me, but with Chad. The video quality was good enough to pick out the small, dark birthmark on her left shoulder, just above the strap of her dress. It was the same birthmark I'd traced with my finger countless nights. And there, glinting on her left hand as she reached up to Chad's neck, was my engagement ring. It caught the light, a mocking twinkle, a stark reminder of promises made and now clearly broken. The scent of stale coffee filled the kitchen, mingling with the metallic tang of something that felt like betrayal. The front door opened and then clicked shut. Lisa, Brenda's younger sister, walked in, her face pale, eyes wide and fixed on me. She clutched her own phone like a lifeline. "Oh my God, Aaron," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I just saw Stacy's post. I'm so sorry." The apology hung in the air, heavy and thick. It wasn't an apology for a mistake. It was for a public humiliation. I picked up a piece of the broken mug, my thumb tracing its rough edge. "Did you know?" My voice sounded unnaturally calm, flat, like I was discussing the weather. It didn't feel like my voice at all. Lisa shook her head, her brown hair falling across her face. "No, Aaron, I swear. Mom and Dad, they're beside themselves. They thought she was with her friend group for a bachelorette weekend out of state. They're worried sick." Her words felt distant, an echo of my own desperate thoughts from hours ago. I kept scrolling through the comments below the video. Each one was a fresh cut, a new sting. "Chad and Brenda back together, always knew it." Another read, "Pre-wedding jitters done right, LOL. Someone else had tagged them both. You two are goals." The judgment wasn't mine to make, but the comments were making it for everyone else. They were writing the story, and I was just the punchline. Then I saw it, tucked in between laughing emojis and hard eyes, a comment from one of Chad's friends. 7 days till we break Paris. 7 days. Not a quick fling, not a spur-of-the-moment lapse in judgment. This was a planned absence, a week-long escape. A week she'd told me she was working late, catching up on projects. A week she'd allowed me to believe she was safe, just out of reach, but always coming home. My thumb hovered over Brenda's contact. I tapped it. Her personalized ringtone played twice. Then her familiar voice kicked in, light and airy. "Hey, it's Brenda. Leave a message." Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My fingers moved, typing out a quick message, devoid of emotion, a simple statement of fact. "I know you're in Paris. Call me now." I hit send. No reply. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. A cold clarity washed over me then, replacing the hot, choking panic. This wasn't about a surprise trip or even a sudden change of heart. This was about respect, or the complete and utter lack of it. It was about lying and disappearing and letting me worry while she was dancing in Paris with another man, wearing my ring. "I need to make some calls," I said to Lisa, my voice steady now. I reached for my phone again, not for Brenda this time, but for someone else. Lisa took a step closer, her hand reaching out, then hesitating. Aaron, wait, maybe there's an explanation. Something she can tell you. I shook my head, my gaze fixed on the shattered mug pieces on the floor. There's no explanation that makes disappearing for days without a word okay. Not when you're about to marry someone. The first call I made wasn't to Brenda or to her parents or even to my own. It was to my bank. As a project manager, my mind had already begun sorting the chaos into actionable steps, and financial security sat at the top of the list. The cold, sterile voice of the automated system connected me to Gary, my account manager, a man whose patience I'd tested before with mortgage paperwork. Gary, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. I need to discuss some urgent matters regarding my accounts and Brenda's. I kept the details vague, sticking to facts. Unforeseen circumstances. There's been a development. I need to ensure my personal finances are secure. Gary listened, his tone sympathetic but professional. He didn't pry. That was Gary's way. He understood the unspoken, the things people said through what they left out. He guided me through the process with calm efficiency. We separated my personal checking and savings from our joint account, which held the funds for the wedding. New passwords for everything, a temporary freeze on any withdrawals from the joint account that required only one signature. The digital ledger of my life, usually an afterthought, now felt like the most vulnerable part of me. I didn't honestly believe Brenda would drain our savings. She wasn't malicious, or at least I never thought she was. But the thought had crept in, a small, insidious doubt. It wasn't about her character, not entirely. It was about feeling some small measure of control in a situation where everything else had spiraled beyond my grasp. Each click, each confirmation was a small victory against the growing sense of helplessness. The bank's online interface, usually mundane, now felt like a fortified bunker. With my finances somewhat contained, I moved to the next critical step. I called Kevin, my old college roommate, now a family law attorney in Columbus. We hadn't talked in months, but he was the first person who came to mind. My hands were still shaking, but my voice remained level as I recounted the sequence of events. The TikTok video, Brenda and Chad, Paris, the 3 days of silence, the engagement ring on her finger. There was a long silence on Kevin's end after I finished. Jesus, Aaron, he finally said, his voice a low rumble. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry, man. His shock was palpable, genuine. It was a mirror of my own just a few hours earlier. Yeah, I managed. Me too, but I need to know. Legally, what are my options? We got the apartment lease, joint accounts, wedding vendors paid largely from my savings. The ring. I listed them off, my project manager brain taking over, trying to compartmentalize the emotional wreckage into a checklist of problems to be solved. Kevin cleared his throat, shifting into his professional cadence. All right, first thing, you need to cancel all those wedding vendors. Venue, caterer, photographer, florist, the band, all of them. Immediately. See what their cancellation policies are. You might get some partial refunds depending on the contract and how much time is left. You probably won't get everything back, but every little bit helps. Do it in writing, follow up with calls. He paused, probably sifting through the legal code in his head. The engagement ring, he continued. In Ohio, it's generally considered a conditional gift. The condition being you get married. If the engagement is broken, typically the person who gave the ring is entitled to get it back, regardless of who broke it or why. He didn't need to state the obvious reasons why the engagement was broken. The video was clear enough. I grabbed a notepad and a pen from the kitchen counter, my hands still trembling slightly as I scrawled notes. Cancel vendors. Written notice. Conditional gift. Ring. A strategic roadmap, however bleak, began to form in my mind. It was a small comfort, a thin thread of practicality in a fabric shredded by betrayal. I felt marginally better, not emotionally, but practically speaking. There were steps I could take. I sent a quick email to my team, canceling all my meetings for the day, citing a personal emergency. My colleagues, mostly good Midwestern people, wouldn't ask too many questions. They'd just understand in that quiet way. Lisa, Brenda's sister, was still in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa, talking softly into her phone. She looked up, her face grim. Stacy organized the trip, she said, her voice tight. Called it a girls' trip to Nashville. Only it wasn't just girls, and it wasn't Nashville. The pieces were fitting together, revealing a deception far more elaborate than I could have imagined. It was just past midnight when my phone finally lit up, Brenda's face beaming from the screen. 6 a.m. in Paris. I'd spent hours pacing my apartment, the smell of shattered coffee mug still lingering, rehearsing. I'd built entire scripts in my head, calm, firm responses, a bulwark against the wave of emotion I knew would try to drown me. I was determined. No yelling, no begging, just the facts. I answered, "Where the hell are you?" My voice was controlled, I thought, but the word hell slipped out, sharp and unbidden. The adrenaline that had been a dull hum all day surged, making my ears ring. Brenda's voice was slurred, distant, like she was talking through a thick blanket. Music thumped in the background, a relentless bass line. "Aaron, don't start," she whined. "I'm having an amazing time, and I don't need you ruining it with your overprotective—" My rehearsed responses, the calm, factual ones, evaporated like morning mist. "Overprotective?" I shouted, pacing the small bedroom, the carpet soft under my bare feet. "Overprotective, Brenda? You disappeared for 3 days. Your parents thought you were dead. I called hospitals. I called the police. I called everyone but the goddamn morgue." She scoffed, a sound that grated on my raw nerves. "Oh, please. I'm a grown woman. I don't need to check in with you every 5 minutes." The sheer absurdity of her statement left me speechless for a beat. Every 5 minutes? It had been 3 days. 3 days of agonizing worry, of imagining the worst, while she was apparently living her best life in Paris. "You didn't tell a soul where you were going," I managed to say, my voice tight, straining against the need to scream. "And now I find out you're partying with your ex in Paris, wearing my engagement ring, while I'm here going out of my mind." There was a pause on her end, a muffled conversation, a distinct click as if a door had closed, and the thumping music faded slightly. "Chad is just part of the group," she said defensively, her voice a little clearer now, but still thick with whatever she'd been drinking. "It's not like that." "The TikTok I saw suggests otherwise," I countered, my mind replaying the image of them dancing, intimately close. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Brenda, what's going on? Why would you do this? We're getting married in 3 weeks." The date hung in the air, mocking us both. She snapped, the slurring gone, replaced by a sudden sharp edge. "That's exactly why. Do you know how stressful wedding planning is? How much pressure I've been under? I deserve this, Aaron. I deserve a break before I commit to you forever." Commit to you forever. The words hit me like a physical blow, not marry you or build a life with you, but commit to you forever, as if it were a prison sentence, a burden she was reluctantly accepting. The air left my lungs. "When are you coming home?" I asked, my voice hollow, the resolve to be calm long gone. "We're here until next Sunday." Next Sunday. That meant almost 2 full weeks. "Brenda," I said, trying to push past the shock, "that's 11 days before our wedding. We have the rehearsal dinner to finalize. Your dress fitting is scheduled for Tuesday. We have to pick up the rings." "No," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm not cutting my trip short because you're being insecure. It's my last chance to have fun before I'm a wife." "Your last chance to have fun?" I repeated, incredulous, the words tasting like ash. "Is that how you see marriage to me? The end of fun?" She backpedaled a beat too late. "That's not what I meant. You know that's not what I meant." But it was what she said. The words had already found their mark, burrowing deep. "And what about Chad?" I pressed, unwilling to let it go. "Your ex, who you told me was just a college fling. The same Chad who, according to Lisa, you were actually engaged to briefly?" Silence again, heavier this time. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Lisa had no right to tell you that." So it's true. Another piece of my world crumbled, another foundation stone turning to dust. It was ages ago, Aaron. We were kids. It lasted like 3 months. It wasn't serious. You were engaged to him and never thought to mention it to me in 4 years? The betrayal of omission felt as stark as the public display. Brenda let out a frustrated yell. Because it wasn't important. God, this is exactly why The line went dead. The crushing silence of my bedroom filled the void, punctuated only by my ragged breathing. I tried calling Brenda back. Straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. She wasn't She wasn't coming home. No more pretending. The receiver felt heavy in my hand as I finally lowered it. I walked back into the living room. Lisa was still there, sitting on the edge of the sofa, looking at her phone. Her face was a landscape of distress. When I told her the highlights of the call, the slurred words, the casual dismissal, the last chance to have fun, her eyes welled up. "I'm so sorry, Aaron," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never should have said anything about Chad. Maybe if I hadn't, you two could have worked this out." I shook my head, the motion slow and deliberate. "No, Lisa, it wasn't your fault. Not really. The truth would have come out one way or another. It was just a matter of time." Her revelation about Chad had been a catalyst, certainly, but the rot had been there, deep down, long before. Lisa's shoulders sagged. She picked at a loose thread on the armrest. "Brenda, she's always been like this. Not exactly like this, but..." She trailed off, searching for the right words. Vague commitments, needing space, unexplained disappearances for a few days here and there. Remember that time she went to New York for a fashion show for a week and wouldn't answer her phone? Or when she suddenly decided to go on a yoga retreat in Arizona with Stacy for a long weekend? I did remember. I remembered all of it. And I remembered the excuses I'd made, the way I'd smoothed over my own concerns, rationalizing her behavior, explaining it away. Brenda needs her independence. She's just stressed with work. It's good for her to have time with her friends. My own self-deception, now laid bare, was almost as painful as her betrayal. Dave, my best friend, had always been wary. "She's a wild one, Aaron," he'd said once over beers. "You're steady, she's flighty. Are you sure you're seeing her clearly?" I had dismissed him, of course, accused him of being jealous, protective, called him cynical. Now his words echoed, hollow and prophetic. He'd seen the manipulative streak, the self-serving nature, while I'd been blinded by what I wanted to believe was love. The decision, though agonizing, now solidified in my mind with a cold, absolute clarity. There was no going through with the wedding. Not now, not ever. The very idea of it, after this, was an insult to myself, to any semblance of respect I had left. I went to my home office, a small room filled with books and a desktop computer, usually a sanctuary of calm. I pulled out a fresh legal pad. My hand, which had been shaking earlier, was steady now. I began compiling a meticulous list. Wedding vendors, deposits paid, contracts signed, venue, X paid in full, caterer, Y, 50% deposit, photographer, seed, 25% deposit, florist, DJ, cake. The sheer financial scale of it, usually a source of excitement, now felt like a lead weight. Each number was a reminder of the future I'd planned, now incinerated. I circled the figure for the engagement ring, a significant chunk of my savings, a symbol of my misguided faith. The diamond, once sparkling with promise, now felt like a shard of ice in my heart. A cold, pragmatic anger began to replace the raw heartbreak. This wasn't just about canceling the wedding and moving on. This was about accountability. This was about the consequences of her actions. I wasn't just canceling. I was crafting a quiet plan to ensure Brenda faced the repercussions. No drama, no yelling, just a steady, methodical dismantling of our shared future, ensuring she understood the cost. Kevin's words about the ring echoed in my head. Conditional gift, entitled to get it back. Yes, I would get it back. It wasn't about the money anymore, not entirely. It was about principle. It was about reclaiming what was mine, physically and metaphorically. A strange mix of desolation and determination filled me. It was a lonely path, I knew, a path I'd never imagined walking. But I was on it now. I took a deep breath, the air cold in my lungs. My next call needed to be to Mr. and Mrs. Miller. They deserved to hear it from me directly. I steeled myself for their reaction, the sadness, the shock, the inevitable questions. This was just the beginning. The call to Mr. and Mrs. Miller felt like a descent into deeper cold. Their voices, usually warm and jovial, were choked with a mix of devastation and mortification. "Aaron, we just don't know what to say," Mrs. Miller whispered, her apology spilling over the phone like a broken dam. "We are so sorry. This is not how we raised her." Mr. Miller tried to interject, his voice thick with a father's protective instinct. It's wedding stress, Aaron. She cracks under pressure, you know. It's a lot for a young woman." I listened, letting him finish, but my resolve remained firm. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, this isn't just stress. This is disrespect. This is disappearing for days, lying to everyone, and partying with another man while wearing my ring. And frankly, it's not behavior I can marry." My voice was calm, resolute, like bedrock. I informed them I was canceling the wedding, all of it, and that I intended to recover my expenses. They offered to cover some of the lost deposits, a desperate attempt to mitigate the damage. "No," I said politely but firmly. "Thank you, but no. This is Brenda's responsibility." The line went silent again, the weight of my words settling between us. The next few days became a methodical parade of phone calls and emails. The venue coordinator, a kind woman who'd helped us pick out linens, expressed her sorrow, but her cancellation policy was clear. My substantial deposit was non-refundable. The caterer, a bustling man named Tony, offered a partial refund if I could find a replacement booking, but the likelihood was slim. The florist, the band, the cake designer. Each conversation chipped away at my savings, confirming Kevin's prediction. I noted every penny, every lost deposit on my growing list. The financial anchor, though painful, kept me grounded. Through Kevin, a formal letter was dispatched. It outlined the cancellation of the wedding and, more importantly, a clear expectation: the return of the engagement ring and a contribution to the shared expenses, specifically the non-refundable deposits from the vendors. It was clinical, devoid of emotion, a legal document. It felt right. One afternoon, with Dave's help, I discreetly changed the locks on our apartment door. The old key, which Brenda still carried, would now be useless. Then carefully, methodically, I boxed up Brenda's belongings: her clothes, her shoes, her books, the framed photos of us. I didn't break anything. I didn't tear anything. I just packed it all, folding each item with a strange, detached precision, as if preparing for a long move. The boxes went into the spare room, stacked neatly against the wall. No drama, just practical actions. A quiet dismantling of a life that would no longer be. Dave, my rock, stayed for hours. We drank lukewarm beer in silence, or he talked, offering unwavering support. "You deserve better, buddy," he had said, his hand resting on my shoulder. "A good woman who knows what she's got." His presence alone helped clear my head, reminding me I wasn't entirely alone in this desolate landscape. I felt the immense weight of what I was doing, the finality of each canceled contract, each packed box. But underneath that weight, a growing sense of relief took root, a quiet conviction that this was justice. Not revenge, but justice. For the lies, for the disrespect, for the 3 days of terror I'd endured while she danced in Paris. I mentally prepared for Brenda's inevitable return. Her outrage, her attempts to deflect, to charm, to twist the narrative. She wouldn't expect this, the quiet, methodical precision of my actions. But I was ready. I had done my part. The stage was set. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. A week later, just as the evening commute traffic began to thin, Brenda returned. I heard her fumbling with the keys at the door, a series of clicks that usually signaled her arrival. This time there was a pause, a longer silence, then a distinct jingle as she tried her old key. It didn't work. A moment of confusion must have passed, then another click. She must have still had that spare key I thought I'd collected. The door swung open. She stepped inside, looking tanned and tired, the Parisian glow already fading into the weary reality of travel. Her large carry-on bag thumped onto the floor. She paused, surveying the apartment. The living room was exactly as she'd left it, save for the lack of wedding magazines on the coffee table. Then her eyes landed on the spare room where the boxes of her life were neatly stacked. I was waiting for her in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, a glass of water in my hand. My heart was pounding, a steady drum against my ribs, but my exterior was calm as a lake in summer, still and deep. "What is all this, Aaron?" she demanded, her voice sharp, instantly accusatory, the weariness forgotten. She walked toward the spare room, peering at the labeled boxes. "There is no wedding, Brenda," I stated simply, my voice even. "I canceled it." The words hit her like a physical blow, her face contorted. "You what?" she shrieked, her voice rising. "You controlling bastard! You insecure prick! You ruined everything!" She stomped back into the living room, hands on her hips, her eyes blazing. I pushed off the counter and walked toward her. I held out an envelope, crisp and official. Kevin's letter. "This outlines the legal and financial expectations," I said, my hand steady. "The ring, your share of the expenses, the non-refundable deposits." She snatched the letter, her eyes scanning the first few lines. Then she scoffed, tossing it onto the coffee table with disdain. "You want the ring back? Are you serious? This is ridiculous." Her laughter was hollow, brittle. She still wore it, glinting on her finger, a mocking symbol of what was lost. "You're being spiteful," she accused, pointing a finger at me. "Vindictive. You're a bitter man, Aaron." I maintained my calm. "My actions are a direct consequence of yours, Brenda. The TikTok video, disappearing for 3 days, lying to me, to your parents, partying with your ex in Paris while wearing my ring, casual disrespect for our shared future. That's not bitterness, that's just facing facts." My voice dropped, low and steady, the quietest I'd spoken since she walked in. "I deserve better than to be an afterthought to your last chance to have fun." Her expression wavered. The anger softened, replaced by a familiar welling in her eyes, a quivering lip, the manipulation, the tactics she'd used so many times to deflect, to gain sympathy. "Aaron, please," she began, reaching out a hand. "I can explain. I was stressed. It was a mistake. We can fix this." My resolve held firm. "No, Brenda, we can't." Her hand dropped. The tears vanished, replaced by a fresh wave of fury. "Fine. If you want to be a petty ass, I'll sue you for emotional distress, for ruining my reputation." My reply was succinct, prepared. "Kevin is ready to handle that." She let out a frustrated scream, a guttural sound that echoed in the quiet apartment. She snatched up her carry-on, stalked into the bedroom, and moments later emerged, throwing a few essentials into the bag. Her perfume, a familiar scent I'd once loved, now felt alien. "I'm going to Lisa's," she yelled, slamming the front door behind her. "Or my parents. You won't hear from me again." I just watched her go, the click of the newly changed lock on the door a final decisive sound. I called Mr. and Mrs. Miller again after Brenda stormed out. They listened, their voices heavy with exhaustion. They weren't surprised, not really. Disappointed, certainly, profoundly so. But the undercurrent of resignation suggested they'd seen variations of this behavior before. It was just a larger, more public manifestation this time. Their apologies, while sincere, felt hollow against the cold reality of the broken engagement. News of the canceled wedding spread quickly through our shared social circles. In a community like ours, where everyone knew everyone and gossip traveled faster than a Midwest thunderstorm, it was inevitable. The murmurs began, the hushed conversations at the grocery store, the knowing glances at church. Stacy, Brenda's friend and architect of the girls' trip that wasn't, took to social media. Vague, sympathetic messages about unjust situations and two sides to every story, clearly aimed at me, trying to paint me as the villain. A wounded party, wronged by an unreasonable fiancé. But my quiet plan wasn't about shouting back. It was about making the truth known without stooping to her level. I logged on to my own social media. After a moment, I posted a carefully worded message. It was stoic, devoid of overt emotion. I thanked friends and family for their support during a difficult time. I wished Brenda happiness in her chosen path. The subtext hung heavy for anyone willing to read between the lines. There was no vitriol, no accusation, just a quiet dignity that spoke volumes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone buzzed with messages. Mutual friends, colleagues, even distant relatives, all expressing shock. But more importantly, sympathy and support for me. They knew me. They knew Brenda. The quiet ones, the observant ones, had already begun to piece things together. They heard the subtle implications in my post. Lisa, Brenda's sister, saw Stacy's posts and, bless her heart, couldn't let it stand. She confronted Stacy online, not with outright accusations, but by defending my character and hinting at facts not everyone knows. The narrative began to shift. Brenda's attempt to control the story, to play the victim, backfired. More people started asking questions, and more people learned the full extent of her casual disregard, her lies, her Parisian escapade. A few days later, a small package arrived at my door. No return address, but I knew who it was from. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the engagement ring. It glittered under the kitchen light, cold and hard. With it was a short, bitter note from Brenda. "Here's your stupid ring. Hope you're happy." I felt a pang, a ghost of the hope and love that ring once represented. But it was fleeting. The ring was just an object now, a symbol of a lost future and a significant financial investment. I contacted a jeweler, a friend of my mother's. He offered me a fair price. I sold it, recovering a decent portion of my initial costs. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming what was mine. Through Kevin, I sent Brenda an itemized bill. Her portion of the non-refundable deposits, calculated precisely. Her share of the joint living expenses for the months leading up to the breakup. It was meticulous, unarguable. The public unveiling wasn't a grand spectacle or a messy shouting match. It was a quiet, dignified separation, allowing the community to understand the truth without me having to shout it from the rooftops. It was a testament to the power of quiet action over loud accusations. Brenda, as expected, refused to pay the itemized bill. The text I received from her, before I blocked her number, called it extortion and petty. Her indignation was predictable, almost a script I'd learned to anticipate. It solidified my decision to involve Kevin, to make it formal. Kevin initiated legal proceedings for breach of contract and recovery of shared expenses. It was tedious, draining, a paper war fought with summons and discovery requests. Each document that arrived felt like a fresh cut, tearing at the scab of old wounds. It wasn't about the money anymore, not entirely. It was about seeing it through, about setting a precedent, about the tangible price of deceit. Brenda's reputation, once sparkling and carefree, took a significant hit. Especially among the more traditional families, the bedrock of our small Midwestern community, who valued loyalty and commitment above all else. Whispers turned into quiet judgments. The Miller family, pillars of the community, now carried the burden of their daughter's actions. Chad's involvement became clearer as old college friends, observing the drama, started sharing stories. He wasn't exactly a pillar of consistency himself, a charming drifter who bounced from one thing to the next, never settling. Their renewed connection was less about true love and more about two people finding comfort in a familiar, chaotic pattern. State continued her online defense of Brenda, but her efforts seemed increasingly isolated, like a lone voice preaching to a shrinking choir. The public narrative had shifted, solidified by my quiet dignity and Brenda's increasingly erratic behavior. Mr. and Mrs. Miller were caught in the middle, deeply ashamed of their daughter's actions, but still trying, in their quiet way, to support her. It was a tough spot for good people, watching their child unravel, knowing they couldn't fix it. I felt for them a quiet, distant empathy. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Brenda had moved in with Stacy. Her financial struggles were becoming apparent. She'd always expected to slot seamlessly into my more stable life, my steady income, my carefully planned future. Now, without that safety net, she was scrambling. It was a harsh dose of reality, one I wouldn't wish on anyone, but one she'd brought upon herself. Brenda tried to appeal to my past affection. A flurry of emotional, manipulative texts found their way to my phone from unfamiliar numbers. Regret, apologies, pleas for a second chance. The woman I'd loved, desperate and grasping. But I had built a wall, brick by brick, during her Parisian absence and the subsequent fallout. The words slid off, hitting no mark. I blocked her numbers, one by one, until the silence finally settled. I reflected on the slow, corrosive nature of betrayal, how it strips away illusions and reveals true character. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd loved, was a creation of my own hopeful imagination, built on a shaky foundation of her casual disregard. It hurt, but the truth, however brutal, had a cleansing power. Dave remained a steady presence, a constant in the emotional turbulence. We'd go for runs, lift weights, talk about nothing and everything. He didn't offer advice unless asked, but his unwavering friendship reminded me of my own strength, the resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The legal battle dragged on, a grim reminder of the tangible price of deceit and moral missteps. It was slow, expensive, but necessary. Each hearing, each exchange of documents was a step towards a clear, definitive end. In the midst of it all, I secured a new, smaller apartment on the other side of town. It was modest, quiet, and completely mine. A fresh start, untainted by the ghosts of what might have been. The boxes of Brenda's belongings remained in the spare room of my old apartment, waiting for a final, formal exchange through our respective attorneys. Many months passed, marked by endless legal documents, court dates, and the slow, grinding machinery of justice. Finally, a settlement was reached, largely in my favor, as Kevin had promised, but I only recovered a portion of my actual financial losses. The non-refundable deposits, the lost time, the emotional toll, those costs were immeasurable, unrecoverable. It was justice, yes, but not total restitution. Brenda faced significant financial repercussions. The mounting legal fees, the settlement she had to pay, forced her to confront the true price of her choices. No more easy outs, no more relying on others to bail her out. She had to stand on her own, something she'd never truly learned to do. I, meanwhile, moved on. I poured my energy into my career at the architecture firm, dedicating myself to projects, to design, to the tangible act of building. My life, too, was being rebuilt, one solid brick at a time, each day a new foundation. I learned to trust again, slowly, deliberately. The process was painstaking but necessary. I recognized the subtle red flags now, the evasions, the casual dismissals, the self-serving patterns I'd willfully ignored before. Growth, I understood, often came from pain, a hard-won lesson carved into my core. Occasionally, through mutual acquaintances, I'd hear updates about Brenda. She was struggling, jumping from job to job, never quite finding her footing. Her life was less stable, less glamorous, than the one she'd once envisioned for herself, the one she'd expected to inherit effortlessly by marrying me. Chad was not a permanent fixture in her life. He faded away, as transient and unsettled as she was, confirming his role as a fleeting distraction, a mirror to her own unsettled nature. They were two pieces that didn't quite fit, always moving, never truly connecting. I often reflected on the deep-rooted Midwestern values I'd grown up with: honesty, loyalty, hard work, responsibility. Brenda's actions and her subsequent struggles defied them all. She had chosen a different path, one that promised instant gratification but delivered a heavy toll. I found peace in the quiet, predictable rhythms of my everyday life. My new apartment, smaller but entirely my own, felt like a sanctuary. The chaos and unpredictability Brenda had brought were gone, replaced by a calm, steady hum. I could read a book, watch a movie, or just sit in silence, without the underlying tension of wondering where she was or what new drama she might unleash. I understood that the most profound revenge wasn't always grand or public. It wasn't about shouting or seeking dramatic retribution. It was the quiet, dignified act of moving forward, of crafting a better life for myself, a life she was no longer a part of. That, I realized, was its own powerful justice. Forgiveness, I realized, even if not directly given to Brenda, was a gift I gave myself. It wasn't about absolving her, but about releasing myself from the bitterness, the anger, the hold she still had on my emotions. It allowed me to truly let go, to free myself from the past. I often looked out at the familiar Midwestern landscape, the rolling fields stretching out under indifferent skies, the quiet towns nestled among them. A deep sense of resilience settled within me. The pain remained a part of my story, a scar, a reminder of what had been lost, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't a victim. I was a man who had paid a price for love, a steep one, but one who had found his own way back to himself, stronger and clearer than before. The slow, methodical process of rebuilding my life had, in its own way, become a quiet triumph. The legal battles eventually faded into memory, the financial sting dulled over time. Brenda faced her consequences, and I moved forward, a little wiser, a little harder, but ultimately whole. The Midwestern landscape outside my window, with its steadfast fields and unwavering horizons, mirrored the resilience I now found within myself. It was a clear, unadorned truth. Some endings are simply necessary, not a defeat, but a liberation. And in that liberation, a stronger, more authentic self emerges, ready for whatever comes next.